Dispatchers of Reddit, what calls have you taken on the non-emergency line that definitely was an emergency? Had a guy tell me he is on his way to ER and asked if we have a wheelchair waiting for him because he thinks he will pass out as soon as he shows up. Turns out he cut his hand clean off, and was driving one-handed bleeding all over the place to ER. Dude even picked up his hand and put it in his jacket pocket. Not a dispatcher, but got a call about a noise disturbance from a farm at the edge of city limits. Turns out a party had gotten hijacked by a tweaker who thought it was a good idea to break into a house full of teenagers. Turned into a 3-hour hostage situation. Guy crashed when the drugs left his system, nobody got hurt. I work in emergency road service. I got a call for a lockout where a disabled woman was locked inside her car because of electrical issues. Because she had some kind of electronic assistance for getting in out of the car, and the car was dead, she was stuck. It was snowing to beat the band, and non-emergency response times were 4 hours. It was 20 degrees out. I told her to call 911 and she absolutely refused to do it. Used to work for the 111 service, which is supposed to be non-emergency. The most memorable ones was when a guy's wife just fell asleep. Yeah, she was dead. Another one was a mom called us after her 18-month-old wouldn't wake up, after she dropped it down a fucking flight of fucking stairs. Edit, I forgot to add she was contacting us about 7 hours after it occurred. One was a guy whose mom called us as she had some concerns for her son's mental health, gives me his number so I give him a call. All I hear is, edit. It was her daughter-in-law's number. He's got a knife, please my baby, and the call cuts out. Everything turned relatively fine according to the call notes. A call from a phone box from a guy saying he was taking some drugs, he wouldn't say which, with his friend who then had an overdose and started foaming at the mouth and went a funny color. So the guy ran away. I asked when this occurred, to which the guy responded about 15 minutes. I never found out what the specific outcome was, but let's be honest. Plenty of strokes, heart attacks, kids drinking bleach, basically anything and everything you could imagine. You'd be calmly asking questions while frantically gesturing the universal phrase for "why the fuck are you calling us?" Edit, got a call on a Sunday afternoon that went like this. My wife has taken a bit of a funny turn. Maybe 7-10 times I heard this phrase. It ends up being some kind of common stroke symptom. Been complaining that her arm went numb. And she started slurring her speech. She's been feeling dizzy and complaining of a really bad headache. We didn't call anyone because it was the weekend, but it's got a lot worse. Okay, when did the symptoms begin? Friday afternoon. I used to work for 111, which is the non-emergency medical line here in the UK. I once had a call from a carer for an elderly lady, who was wheelchair-bound and pretty much immobile. Upon taking the call, one of the first questions I ask is, can I possibly speak to the patient? Which is normally a quick yes or no. The carer hummed for a good couple of minutes before deciding no. I couldn't speak to the patient. Her reasoning? The patient couldn't breathe and was turning blue. Not a dispatcher, but I called about a lost dog near the beach one summer. The dispatcher asked if it had a collar, what breed it was, etc., and we eventually realized it was a coyote. For bonus points, when animal control and the cops showed up, they told me it had rabies. Thankfully it was early enough, nobody was at the beach yet. One time I called 411 because a guy had a handsaw and was cutting down a tree along the sidewalk of Clark Street in Chicago. The 411 operator said she was connecting me to 911, and I tried to say it wasn't a big deal, just send someone when you can, etc. She interrupted. You're telling me that a man with saws on Clark Street and showing signs of being nuts? Yup, 911 please. When I took calls for 101 UK non-emergency police line, I had a similar call. I didn't really know who to call, but there's a guy working down the street with a big knife, and he's just stabbing trees and stuff. He turned out to be an autistic young man on his way back from fishing, and was surprised and apologetic to hear that his behavior had caused harm. Also there's a group of kids in McDonald's with a machine gun, and when I asked the caller why he hadn't called the emergency number, he got all uppity and replied, Well, I don't know if it's a real gun, do I? It wasn't, thankfully, but it's impossible to tell unless a trained officer is holding it in their hand. And again, this is the UK, so it is extremely unusual to even see a gun in the wild. Not a dispatcher but a paramedic. We got a call for a fall and the patient only needed help up. Per dispatch notes, reporting party said patient was breathing, conscious, and was at her normal mental status. We didn't run lights and sirens due to no apparent life threats and the relatively short distance, under 2 miles with light traffic. Get inside. Patient is having a full-blown stroke, she is unresponsive, and was struggling to breathe. The wall right next to her head had a hole that busted through the drywall. Patient ended up having a hemorrhagic stroke, and it was believed to have happened when she hit the wall. We took her home on hospice a few days later. Still annoys me to this day about the whole situation, but you live and you learn. However, there is not much we or the hospital could have done. Family honored her wishes and asked for comfort measures. I went to one fall where patient was reporting a sore knee and not much else. When we got there, turned out she had fallen 3 meters from a ladder while fixing her gutters the day before. Is pretty sure she blacked out for a while, and her right knee leg was at least twice the size of her left. Couldn't bend it at all to even attempt getting in a car, and couldn't even see where her kneecap had gone. X-ray later revealed it was about 4 inches further around her leg than it should have been. Also turned out she had multiple breaks in her tibia and fibula. Cranial X-ray also revealed a skull fracture. She lived alone and was in no condition to drive herself to hospital, but wasn't sure it was serious enough to call an ambulance for. Decided to call when her leg didn't seem any better the next day. Advice: if you fall 3 meters from a ladder onto concrete, you need to go to the hospital.